Thanks everyone for being here. If you don't know who I am, I'm Elsa Vivas-Potter. I'm the operations coordinator with the California Alliance for Community Energy. And today for the statewide call, we're going to be hearing from Selena and Crystal about the REFOCUS campaign of the Energy Democracy Project. So that's Reimagining Energy for Our Communities US. And in the face of climate catastrophe, the utility caused calamity across the country, energy democracy leaders are demanding that control, ownership, and decision-making of energy resources be returned to our communities rather than corporate boardrooms. The Energy Democracy Project is a collaboration of more than 30 diverse local frontline organizations across the US, reimagining the ways we organize our lives and livelihoods toward new systems that support the health and well-being of our communities. The REFOCUS, or Reimagined Energy for Our Communities US campaign, launched in 2022 this month to tie the threads of our work together from Alaska to Puerto Rico for a truly resilient, community-based and decentralized energy model. So I'm not sure which of you will kind of take the lead now, but Selena is the coordinator for the REFOCUS campaign and Crystal for the Energy Democracy Project. And I'll turn it over to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the intro, Elsa. Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing on this fine Thursday? See head nods and waves. Thank you. So we're really excited to be here. My name is Crystal Hwang. I think I've definitely been here wearing my People Power Solar Cooperative hat before. For those who don't know me, I am now here speaking on behalf of the Energy Democracy Project, and Elsa just did a whole lot of intro. I use any pronouns here. I'm calling from the unceded territory of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people, so-called Berkeley, California, and really excited to be here to share with you on what exactly we are talking about when it comes to reimagining energy and how we can do it together for the movement. And before I jump in, I'll pass it over to Selena to say a little hello before we dive in.
Thanks, Crystal. Hi, everyone. I'm Selena. Really delighted to see all of you and see some familiar faces. Excited to chat with those of you who I haven't spoken with before. I'm usually close to all of you on the West Coast, but right now I'm calling in from Lenape land, also known as New York City, visiting some family on my way over to Puerto Rico tomorrow. And really delighted to have the opportunity to speak more about the REFOCUS campaign. As Elsa mentioned, I am the national campaign coordinator for this campaign that launched this month. And we're really gearing up to continue action over the next year. This is going to really set the foundation for our work from Alaska all the way to Puerto Rico. So I'll pass it back over to Crystal to get it started. Should I be the one to share my screen, Crystal?
I got it, no worry.
Okay.
So
cool.
Before I start sharing my screen, I also just want to hear from folks here just a little bit to just get a sense of, I mean, we're all here together as the California Alliance for Community Energy. Can folks just kind of like unmute and share some words on like what exactly you're envisioning the future of energy to look like with your involvement with CAC? John.
More investor-owned utilities.
Wait, did you say more investor-owned utilities?
No more.
No more, right, thank you. But what does that look like? We don't want investor-owned utility, what do we want?
Yeah, can I go?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's, you know, I've written about this. I don't know where else to put it because these are just all my thoughts. My website is recholtenergy.com. I have something called tempered abundance in there. And this conversation we're having about energy, if this was about medicine, we'd be complaining about drug companies, or we'd be, but basically the model we have is exactly the same. If you start something, you have two options. You fail or you get absorbed by somebody bigger. There needs to be a third option, and the third option is precisely what you're talking about now, the ownership. And I mean actual ownership, not, you know, representatives of owners, but actual ownership should be by each individual. And so if we have a common ownership, then we have an incentive to look after what we own. Anyway, so this model, I think, is one of many that will emerge in the next 20, 25 years. And so I'd like to see it succeed.
Yeah, so I'm hearing shared ownership. Welcome, Ali. We're just doing a little popcorn here to see what we're all coming together as CAC here. What is that energy future we're working to advance at CAC? You just kind of want to get a sense of how people are feeling. And from Gopal, we're hearing shared decision making, shared ownership of the energy infrastructure. Anything else? Just kind of like throw into the space here.
Hi, I'm Beverly. I'm with the Electric Vehicle Association, Central Coast. Hi, Crystal and everyone. I'm actually on another call as well, waiting to testify for CARB on the clean transportation for level 7 and 8 heavy duty vehicles. And my vision as part of the whole energy structure has to do with vehicles, and I would like to see all vehicles transitioned to electric vehicles and not hydrogen, which is like driving the vehicle twice. To use hydrogen, 95% of hydrogen is produced by natural gas. So the fossil fuel industry really has an investment in hydrogen, and it's not clean and renewable.
So I'm
as
hearing,
electricity.
Beverly, I'm hearing we want to move away from fossil fuel and get clean energy, and you're seeing clean energy as electrification.
Electrification specifically, and what I'm referring to here is in all of transportation,
Right,
which CARB
right.
is doing some work on, but not quickly enough. But I'm
Great.
going to testify about that in just a few minutes, so
Okay,
I might have
good
to drop
stuff.
out.
Okay, well, we get Brett real quick, and then I can start moving forward.
Yeah, real quick, I'll just say renewable, local, and decisions should be made based on community needs as opposed to corporate profits.
Thank you so much for the succinct and concise answer. Thank you, Brett. So yes, that's what we're here to do. We got a bunch of different answers, but really coming together in what Brett succinctly summarized as local community control and in many ways decentralized clean energy, decarbonize, not having fossil fuel. But what exactly are we facing today? First, I want to share a little graphic here in front of us. Is what we're facing. And what this graphic means for us is over the past years, the collaborators within the Energy Democracy Project, as Elsa mentioned, we have 40 collaborators across the country. We've engaged with each other in learning about each other, learning from each other, the barriers to energy democracy, how we can actually make that vision come true. And we identify a common theme. Doesn't matter if we're pushing for public takeover, doesn't matter if we're pushing for community ownership with like actual community scale solar project or municipal scale community solar project or community choice energy program. It is just the same thing here. It's this big triangle. It's more than just the thirst for fossil fuel. It is an ongoing colonialism that's happening in all of our communities. Because energy impacts all of us, is really how we turn on lights, how we cook our food, how we keep warm, how we keep our food safe. It's everything. It's more than just electrification, as Beverly mentioned. It's transportation. It's how we move around. It's how we find shelter and safety. But the energy system today, in which energy development, control, ownership, and decision making literally resides within the Wall Street and corporate electric utilities. This negatively impacts the safety of our communities, as you can see at the bottom of the pyramid. And of course, when it comes to communities, there's a whole pyramid there. And the status quo also fails to provide the energy needed to live for many people, especially in the face of climate disaster, like we've heard with the hurricanes in Puerto Rico or the South, and now we have wildfires in the West in the past years. The current energy paradigm really just benefits Wall Street and corporate electric utility companies while leaving communities of people in the dust of their pollution and extractive practices. So we created this graphic really just to showcase this is more than just a thirst of fossil fuel, but really about power and control and what extraction really looks like. If you look carefully, you see more than just the fossil fuel. You see extraction of wealth, extraction of power. All of that is literally taking from money from every single one of us. So our communities have no choice of their energy sources and no say in how we design the system. The status quo, as we know very well, as John mentioned as the first answer, no more investor-owned utility because it is unjust, environmentally, racially, economically, and socially. So now we have, of course, I'm going to go into what exactly do we want. Here we then created really recognizing that there is a movement that's growing. It's more than just in California, from Alaska to Puerto Rico. Communities are who's being impacted first and worst by energy injustice and climate change are advancing a reimagined energy system. And these alternatives really redistribute economic, political, and electrical power. This is way more than decarbonization here. This is really about transferring of power to ensure communities can meet our needs ourselves. We're moving the decision-making power from corporate boardrooms to our communities, including the workers who are building the system. And that's what we call energy democracy. And in succinct way, energy democracy is a process by which we advance frontline community empowerment and liberation. It is in many ways a framework that allows us to come together, reimagine, and really look at what exactly do we want to organize our lives and livelihood toward a new system that support the health and well-being of our communities and ecosystem. So today we're going to figure out how exactly to do that. And I'll pass it over to Selena to walk us through.
Thanks, Crystal. So one of the things we've been working a lot within this campaign is trying to figure out what is the narrative that we're using to talk about energy. I'm sure that all of you on this call have had some sort of experience around the difficulties of explaining what the energy system is, explaining what your vision of a future energy system is, and especially to people who are outside of our niche group of folks who are constantly talking about energy pretty much on the daily. But stories have a really big part in shaping this narrative. I'll go through some examples. The first example, if you click the space button, is a picture from one of the gatherings of the Energy Democracy Project as part of this campaign. We have people coming together, and they are coming together in the face of a continuing global pandemic, in the face of the top-down control of investor-owned utilities, and they're coming together to imagine new futures. Even though the future sometimes looks pretty grim, we're still coming together to do this work. And that's a beautiful story. It's one of hope, it's one of inspiration, and it's one that certainly keeps me going. Another story that really comes to mind for me is Selena, one of my favorite movies. And we see stories in movies and radio and in television. And of course, I wanted to put in this plug for my favorite film, just a story of a girl who had the spirit to believe in a dream and the courage to make it come true. It's a story that I remember, that I love dearly, and I hope that all of you have some sort of stories as well that certainly come to mind as something that gives you hope, as something that makes you feel comfort, and as something that keeps you going. And stories also build movements. We see here Rosa Parks's refusal to change seats. We can also look to a photo of Standing Rock and the water protectors and the incredible organizing of Indigenous leadership for water. And unfortunately, we also see stories spun to fit narratives that block people power. So this is an example of the branding campaign behind ExxonMobil with the words, "Protect Tomorrow Today." This is one of the world's largest publicly traded international oil and gas company, and they're using some of the similar language that we use in our movement building. And so we can look at these photos and already see characters, narratives, antagonists, and conclusions. That's pretty special. Stories shape the world around us. And so how do we use these stories? We can look to our friends over at the Center for Story-Based Strategy and Race Forward, and they shared a strategy that works for them and that can work for us too. And they shared that our narrative power analysis can help us understand the story we are trying to change, Let's go ahead and click on that button. Yeah. The narrative power analysis recognizes that humans understand the world and a role in it through stories, and thus all power relations have a narrative dimension. Likewise, many stories are imbued with power. This could be the power to explain and justify the status quo, or the power to make change imaginable and urgent. So that's why it's so important for us to know the stories from the other side of the conflict, so that we can position ourselves in a way that effectively breaks down their power and breaks down that status quo. Number two, our narrative power analysis also helps us identify the underlying assumptions that allow that story to operate as truth. How is it that ExxonMobil can use Protect Tomorrow today as part of their marketing campaigns? By identifying the underlying assumptions, we can start to figure out how to deconstruct that narrative. And finally, this narrative power analysis helps us find the points of intervention in the story where we can challenge, where we can change, or we can insert an entirely new story. So story-based strategy is an exploration of how social movements can create a shared story for interpreting political issues, like our energy system and like the politicized nature of our energy system. And this is fundamentally about identifying and targeting underlying assumptions that sustain the status quo. So we have to ask what if as a prompt for our stories. And our organizing strategies should ask the question, what if another world was possible? What if the power was held by the people? And what if we won? And if we're able to identify the points of assumption where the endings become contestable, we can effectively forecast an entirely different future that's rooted in justice and that is shaped by some of the notions that some of you have shared in the chat. Such vision-driven actions aren't new and arguably have always existed in successful social change. But by understanding them as interventions at the point of assumption, we can focus on what has made them successful and work to replicate those aspects. We can aim to reclaim the narrative untethered from the confines of the power holders' framing and introduce entirely new ideas, new possibilities, new solutions, and even new identities and ways of being. So I'm going to start off and share a story of what's happening in Puerto Rico, which is one of the main stories that is part of the REFOCUS campaign. And for decades, a collective of Puerto Rican activists have been organizing towards a shared goal of distributed renewable energy for their community, not so different from what we're all doing here on this call as part of CACE. And their vision, quite similarly to ours, is a bottom-up transformation of the island. It's a decentralized, renewable energy model as the pathway to energy justice and key to successfully providing safe, affordable, and reliable energy for the people of Puerto Rico. But there's a conflict. The status quo power holders, namely the foreign-owned Luma Energy and allies in the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority, are bulldozing the people's demands for a justice-aligned energy model. They saw Hurricane Fiona impact 100% of the island last month with extended blackouts, some of which continue. And it's really clear that the outdated grid operated by this corporation and propped up by PREPA is unsafe and unsustainable for Boricuas, for Puerto Ricans. So now activists are turning to organizations in the US and activists in the US like us for support as they ramp up efforts in what's shaping up to be a pivotal period for the future of the island and the archipelago. So REFOCUS is a campaign that is meant to amplify the need for this truly resilient, community-based, and decentralized energy model that sounds quite similar to what we're all fighting for all across the country. And in shaping this campaign, we go back to the story-based strategy. There's 5 different aspects of the story-based strategy, and I just took a moment to share the story of Puerto Rico, and I focused on 3 main aspects. We have the conflict, we have the characters, and we have the underlying assumptions. I hope that it was a digestible way for you to understand how this format can invite other people into understanding the context of our activist efforts of the energy system in California. So again, story-based strategy is a way to think about our work and actions as parts of a whole. So this is more than just good messaging or just key messaging. It's really about analyzing our opposition stories and about rewriting a story of our own. And by rewriting that story, we're then able to integrate powerful messaging to shift perceptions. So in thinking through these three key aspects of conflict, characters, and underlying assumption, I'll walk you through what the status quo power holder uses right now, Luma Energy, that foreign-owned company. I'll walk you through the conflict, the characters, and underlying assumptions, sitting in the seat of the villain for a moment. So in analyzing this story, I went ahead and did a bunch of research on what Luma Energy is up to. I looked at their website. I looked at their pamphlets. I looked at their press releases. And they have a pretty clever story that they've built out to shape the public narrative of what they're doing in Puerto Rico. I'll start off with the conflict. They share that the Puerto Rican grid is in disrepair. After decades of abandonment by PREPA, Luma Energy has worked to repair, reconstruct, and restore the electrical system of Puerto Rico. And Luma's mission is to build a more reliable, more resilient, and a cleaner energy system that is deeply personal to them and is rooted in their belief that Puerto Rico has a bright future. This copy is essentially extracted directly from their website. Pretty good copywriting, I will say. Next, let's go over to characters. There's four main characters in the story of the Puerto Rico grid, as shaped by Luma Energy. So first, Luma Energy positions themselves as a customer-centric energy provider on the island. And they exist, purportedly, for one purpose: to serve the people of Puerto Rico. Their website shares, and I quote, "Working together, our Luma team is making real progress every day across Puerto Rico. We're building a more reliable, more resilient, more customer-focused, and a cleaner energy system for all our customers and their families." Then we have a second character of PREPA. It's their public-private partner. And PREPA chose Luma last year after the island's declaration of bankruptcy, and now relies on Luma to build a more reliable, more resilient, and more customer-focused and cleaner energy system. The next character is FEMA. FEMA, or the Federal Emergency Management Agency, is the funder of nearly 200 development projects on the island. And Puerto Rico's electric generation, transmission, and distribution system is on its way to becoming more robust with the approval of funds for 15 projects under FEMA. Luma Energy is currently in the process of gathering permits for the development of the electricity grid using FEMA funds. And the final character are Puerto Ricans and Puerto Rico residents as customers. So at Luma, they share that their team is made up of 3,000 hardworking men and women who call Puerto Rico home. We work hard every day to prioritize the right actions to build a better energy future for our 1.5 million customers, is what they say on their website. This is from improving safety to increasing reliability to offering the best customer service possible as part of their daily mission. Lastly, let's go over to the underlying assumptions. Underlying assumptions is basically what Luma Energy essentially purports to be true, even though it might be unstated in their press releases. These underlying assumptions are really clever designs that, again, try and shape that public narrative and position Luma Energy as the #1 solutions provider for the island. The assumption is that Puerto Rico needs Luma to optimize power to the island, and that without Luma taking leadership, the island will suffer continued disrepair. They also assume that a wholesale shift to renewable power sources will introduce new doubts about reliability. And Puerto Rico would essentially serve as a test case for a shift to cleaner energy sources and cleaner decentralized energy sources for that matter. And the last assumption is that a move away from Luma's leadership is going to signal unreliability. It's a move away from progress and a continuation of failing and aging equipment. All right, so I just walked you through 3 aspects of the story in Puerto Rico, taking the seat of the villain of Luma. We've got the conflict, the ways in which they shape themselves and their position within the conflict. We have the characters, of how Puerto Rican residents and Puerto Rico customers are interacting with LUMA as the so-called #1 energy services provider for the island. And we have the underlying assumptions. This idea that without LUMA Energy, the Puerto Rican grid would be in disrepair and would fail. This story, in essence, is the story of top-down control. And we've seen this abridged picture of a story through the antagonist lens. We might be able to see some similarities with some of our antagonists here in California. So we'll go over to the next slide, and Crystal's going to invite you all in an activity.
So I'm going to pause for a moment here to just really reiterate a point that Selena made about power and stories and how powerful story is. I think it took me a while to really understand what stories really mean. So it might not really resonate with every single person on this call here on why exactly we're talking about stories. And I just want to take a moment to share that the reason why we're showing up on this call, the reason why we're spending so much time, a lot of time, it's just unpaid, unappreciated work to do this is because we believe in a future. There is a story that we believe in that needs to happen. There is a story about what's actually going on that a lot of people don't know. Like most of my friends have no idea how the wildfire starts is related to PG&E. Most people have no idea there's $100 billion bailout of PG&E that's happening, even if they hate PG&E so much. So all these stories that the villains are spinning that Selena walked us through is a way that keeps people not understanding what the truth that we all know about. So the reason why we're going through and talking about the stories of the villain is for us to understand how they're able to retain power. And we need to understand what that looks like so we can intervene strategically. And so I want to pause a moment here after reflecting on that, also then take a moment to reflect and think about, when we think about Puerto Rico most of the time, I think of media, it's really showing something, an image of victim, an image of poor people that we need to go and help and support. But when we start to shift that and really start to understand that, wait, what they're struggling through is exactly the same thing that we're struggling through. The support and how we show up in solidarity changes completely. So the purpose of a refocus campaign in many ways is for us to build that connection. And we want to take a moment here to really see if you see a parallel to what the stories of the top-down control in Puerto Rico with LUMA, does that sound similar to you at all here in California? So I'll maybe just drop a hint about it was, as we're talking about conflict, character, and assumption. In a conflict, I see being in California here, I think the conflict is large corporate extractive utilities controlled by the Wall Street is in conflict with the people of California, especially frontline communities. There's a conflict there. And the character, I see PG&E, I see the CPUC, I see the governor, I see the Californians. And then the assumption to me, it seems like there's a really big assumption that utility model is working. The centralized energy model, this large scale utility is what we need. And that there is absolutely no way communities can come together and have control. Communities are just consumers. So the assumption is that communities are just sitting there paying their bills, and to have them design the solar system or energy system and figure out how they use their energy is unthinkable for a lot of people. Climate is responsible for California's energy woes, and the only solution is about decarbonization is the assumption. Carbon is the problem, and the transition to renewable energy will solve everything is the assumption. But as we see in the analysis that we have with the triangle, is really that it's the power and control. So how can we make people to get to be in control of the movement? So I'll pause here, and this is the moment where we get to be a little more engaged here, just to do a little reflection on what you see, whether there's hearing that the type of similarity is in your work with CACE around top-down control is similar between California and Puerto Rico. I'll just pause and stop my screen share to open the floor up a little bit to see if you have anything you'd like to share, so we can actually start to look at Puerto Rico, not just as poor people we should help, but really allies who are going through similar struggle. Yes, Jay. You're on mute.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. This is great. I'm in San Diego, Gas and Electric. The part of the deal is this whole, they're going to save us from wildfires, and the greatest wildfire protection in the world is, one example of what they're doing. And recently I just noticed on LinkedIn, a regulatory policy manager job description thing they're hiring. And it's just fantastic to kind of go through it. And it's got the links to all their mission. And I think there's absolute parallels in what we're dealing with, exactly. And what you said about, your friends don't really know this stuff because they have so many other things they're doing. And it really feels to me like, in our discussions we've been having here with Public Power San Diego and some other groups, that we have to get on a neighborhood scale. And we, it's almost like, and I think I was talking about this on another call with you, or a Zoom meeting with you folks, it's almost like those neighborhood libraries. We've got to establish those with our story as well. We don't have access to the TV unless we get free media, and we're somehow playing that. But I really appreciate the way you've focused this today on these, ultimately on who's telling the story, and then what do we do about it? And that's going to be it's an enormous challenge, but I really think it's got to start person to person. And my background comes in all the way back to farm workers, so working with some of those folks, and the thing with house meetings, and all the basics. And how do we kind of get folks organized to do that type of work? I think, again, and especially younger people and people who may be very busy with their own careers and their families and everything else. Somewhere they've got to see that there's opportunity to change, and we have to do it. That's my speech for the day.
Thank you so much for that, Jay. Yes, and that also makes me think about like our work to advance a justice center or just community choice energy program. Is that connected to the rooftop solar fight? Is that connected to the fight for microgrid that actually can work in our community microgrid? Is that connected to the fight for community solar? Is that connected to the high DER proceeding? There's so many fights there's so many Zoom rooms and coalitions that are created for similar things, but we don't get to talk to each other because we're so focused on the nitty-gritty details of what needs to happen. But we're hoping that REFOCUS campaign connects the dots and allow us to see our similarities so we can build power together. I see in chat, Barbara also dropped in chat that the underlying assumptions are particularly similar. For example, the investor-owned utilities are required for energy stability. Local renewables cause problems on the greater grid. The people of California needs the investor-owned utility. We cannot live without them. We have to figure out how to reform investor-owned utility, not try to build power so we can take back control. So everything that we're doing here at the CACE, I believe it's all about putting power into the hands of the people. And that is certainly the case across the country with so many different energy justice organizations. And that's what we're trying to do at REFOCUS campaign, is to unify the movement for energy justice, to bring together communities leading local actions for energy democracy. As we're reimagining energy for our communities across the country, here we'll have pictures, like you can see folks in California. This is with Local Clean Energy Alliance. We have Alaska, Mississippi, Minnesota, and Puerto Rico. Somewhere on this map, probably on the left, I mean, in this map for sure, there's so much more in what we are doing here at CACE to be involved in the struggle for energy democracy. So our effort at the REFOCUS campaign is to unify our fronts and really start to connect. And we have a concrete action that we really like to ask of you to go into this website, energydemocracy.us/refocus, to stay connected, stay coordinated as we unify our messages, celebrating our diversity, not just in our fights, but diversity in our lived experience, diversity in our culture, in our race, gender, all of these things, and diversity to bring us together so we can actually build a future where all of us and many different types of worlds can fit in. And we really love for you to sign up to be part of the newsletter, because we are trying to unify the movement and try to have us all coordinate the way that we speak on the problem, because it's not enough to just talk about carbon. It's not enough to just talk about fossil fuel. We need to talk about the top of the pyramid, which is Wall Street. We need to talk about who's actually extracting from all of us using divide and conquer tactics. When you sign up, we really will be asking for you to be our partner, our collaborators, and also asking you to bring your partner, your collaborators, your friends, family, and as Jay mentioned, your neighbors to join the new Refocus newsletter. We're making zines that we're about to be go to print, and we'll be launching the full website soon, where we can actually engage everyday people to really talk about what the struggle looks like, so we can make the hard work that you all are doing at CACE in the policy front more accessible for everyday people. So the action is, again, please go to the website, sign up right now. Let's be in connection and be coordinated, so we can actually start winning this fight and end this ridiculous divide and conquer tactic that they're doing so well to cause us to just be in our own little details and not be able to be connected and really seeing what the problem is. Thank you all so much for the amazing work that you do, and we look forward to be working in solidarity and in community with you all.
I just want to thank everybody for being here, and thank you, Crystal and Selena, for hosting this session. It's really interactive, helpful, and interesting work. So yeah, onward it goes on, and I think that this is definitely something that the California Alliance for Community Energy is really working on integrating. And if anybody, has thoughts or projects or anything, make sure to post that to the list, or on any of the work that specifically is happening, that CAC is working on. You can feel free to reach out to me or Al as well, or any of the steering committee members like Selena.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Thanks for your great questions, and appreciate all the work that you all are doing. Onwards. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all so much.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.